Welcome to a special conversation about trends in data management, hosted by Capital One Software. I'm your host, Belinda McDowell, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. We're here to chat about data management models available for companies and how to best manage your data estate based on your organization. But first, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our featured speakers, Forrester's Michelle Getz and Capital One Software's Patrick Barch. Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thanks for having me today. I'm Michelle Getz. I'm a VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester, covering all things data, insights, artificial intelligence. And what really excites me about our conversation today is how do you make data work for your organization?
Thanks, Michelle. We're excited to have you here, and I'm looking forward to the industry insights you can share that may help other cloud companies manage their data. Patrick, will you tell us a little about yourself?
Thanks, Belinda. I am a Senior Director of Product Management here at Capital One Software, which is a new line of business dedicated to selling cloud and data management solutions to companies that are operating in the cloud. I'm responsible for delivering our first product, which is called Capital One Slingshot, that enables business teams to easily adopt and manage Snowflake while ensuring good governance practices. Prior to this role, I spent 4 years at Capital One working on our data transformation program as a product lead. And before Capital One, I held various roles at media companies, consulting companies, and a couple at startups.
Thanks, Patrick. We're so glad to have you join us today. And a quick bit about myself. I've been with Capital One for over 20 years, spending the majority of my career as a software engineer. I'm currently the head of operations for our newly launched Capital One software business. Capital One recently commissioned Forrester to survey more than 150 data management decision makers in North America. We wanted to find out how their organizations manage their data estate to achieve key business outcomes. And what we found is that more than half of those surveyed maintain a centralized data estate. And they will need vendors to support decentralized and federated models as they continue the journey to the cloud. Today, we're going to expand on those findings. So let's start with Michelle. We have 2 questions for you to kick it off. Could you tell us what you are seeing across the industry in terms of the tools organizations are using to manage their data? And then how are organizations structuring their data estates?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the first one because it'll give some hints as to, where they're prioritizing and the investments that they're making. The data estate to most organizations is not only their internal data and accessing it through, any sort of a portal or through their data environments, but also they're actively gathering information from external or third-party sources. So it's really amassing a lot of information to make great decisions. But as you can imagine, balancing between, internal and external types of use cases across that data estate, the number one area that is being prioritized certainly is around data protection and security. You want to ensure you're, using the data appropriately. You want to ensure that any sort of insights that you're creating or the data that you're housing is not going to be hacked or breached in any way. Certainly when it comes to privacy of your customers, that's going to matter. But it's also ensuring that as you bring in external data, you're vetting it appropriately before you make use of it so that it's not creating any risk or issues for your decision making. But it's also investing in solutions that's making data easier to find and use. I talked about, organizations using internal portals or marketplaces to go after and find the information that is relevant to get to those insights. It's really addressing the data experience for self-service that's expanding across organizations. And the other thing is using the data, in using creating pipelines, querying the information, preparing information so that you can get good support for data and insights for any sort of products and services, like the value creation you are taking to market. So those are really the top 3 things that are happening, but certainly in order to do this and to do it at scale, it comes to investing in things like your cloud data management platforms and your consumption layers so that it's easy to work with the data. It's data governance solutions to ensure that the data is accurate and of high quality. And, using environments or capabilities like data catalogs, for example, that help you, kind of navigate the data estate both as a consumer and those self-service environments for your marketplaces, as well as how do your data engineers and how do your data governance teams better manage and maintain and have full transparency and oversight of the data estate itself.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. I really love the focus on both the risk and governance as well as the end user experience. I think those are both critical things in the Capital One journey as well. Patrick, one stat from the survey we'd like to expand on is that only 15% of those surveyed said their organization is currently federated. Could you tell us what that means to implement federated data management systems?
Yeah, generally, it means creating a central set of data management and data governance policies for your entire organization, tooling those policies in a central set of platforms, and then enabling your line of business teams to get their job done in a federated way. That's the approach that Capital One chose as part of our data transformation to define policies in a common set of tooling and then enable federated data management. And, in my opinion, it's the only way that you can really make the best use of your data in the cloud. When Michelle was talking, she listed, a dozen different jobs to be done across a data ecosystem. And due to the importance of data these days, your internal analysts need to be able to access all of that data via self-service. And so really, federation is the only way to operate at scale in the cloud.
Patrick, you mentioned that the federated model is what the approach that Capital One also chose. Could you expand a little bit more on that and maybe share just a little bit more about the Capital One data transformation, since it's been so important to, our identity as a company? As we like to say, data is the air we breathe.
Sure. So for context, Capital One was the first major bank to fully exit our data centers and go all in on the cloud. And as part of that transformation, we've also been on a journey to transform our ecosystem that really enables us to enhance our personalized experiences for millions of customers. Our legacy data environments were built on outdated technology platforms. The aging technology, it really wasn't compatible with modern cloud machine learning technologies that are so core to business performance these days. And so we had to build a number of new data management platforms and products in the cloud and solve old problems in new ways in our data ecosystem across data publishing, data consumption, data governance, and infrastructure management. We quickly learned that when you move to the cloud, you get a new set of challenges. When you manage your data on-prem, you typically have a central data team that's responsible for managing the company's most important data. Then when you move to the cloud, now you've got way more data coming from way more sources that your analysts and scientists are demanding instant access to via self-service in the tool and consumption pattern of their choice. And so, without coming up with a new model for data management, that old central IT team becomes a bottleneck very, very quickly. And so we made the decision to federate data management responsibility to our lines of business. And so, we had to strike the right balance between business teams having a desire to move at their own pace, moving at the speed of the market. We had to balance that with the central enterprise platform teams and our risk teams' desire to manage risk and control costs. And so that, striking the right balance was really at the heart and the core principle of all of these central platforms and policies that we developed that enabled us to move forward collectively very quickly. These platforms have all of those central policies and governance rules built in so that our central shared services team and our risk teams can trust that everything is remaining well managed, but it also enables our business teams to get their job done at their own pace.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Michelle, you've heard a little bit from Patrick on, the Capital One journey to the federated model. I'd love to get your perspective on, from the industry, what is behind the need from your perspective around the decentralized and federated data support as organizations move their data to the cloud?
Yeah, I think one of the things to kind of expand upon is that it's not just the federation of those types of roles that we're focused on, standing up business intelligence capabilities, or you're not just federating an advanced analytics and data science community. Everybody cares about data. everybody wants insights. Everybody is inquisitive. And is trying to use insights to create new value, to do better jobs, to create more efficiency, to plan. So when we talk about federation, it's also the federation of data and insights across different roles in the organization to meet different types of objectives that we have. If you lock away your data in a centralized environment and you approach it the way that organizations have done in the past with, legacy data warehouse environments, they're usually built for one or two types of use cases. Finance team needs something and marketing and sales might need something. But today, every part of the organization needs data. And what the cloud is really providing is the opportunity to have distribution of information without a lot of copying and moving of the data all the time, and yet still providing easy access and easy consumption of that information, regardless of who you are. And you can access it from a raw form, or you can access it in a refined manner where it's been lightly prepared and ready to use. Or as you move, deeper into the organization where data and insight is being democratized, those that have less technical skills are also getting more prepared consumable data to get their insights. And it's happening in every industry. You can look at pharmaceuticals and healthcare. You can look obviously still across finance, where Capital One has been, kind of driving this in the industry. We see it in retail. We see it in the industrials as well, whether that's oil and gas or power generation. It's when we talked in the past, 10, 20 years ago about the information age, we're living it right now and everybody is embracing it. And that, the only way to do this is to federate. And the only one other thing to kind of add to that is, oftentimes it's talked about, oh, we're going to decentralize. And yes, there's a decentralization to help the wider demand and the wider questions and the wider roles. But federation brings in sort of a grounding or a center of gravity to address those things that we talked about earlier. Like, how do you govern your data? How do you secure and protect it? How do you deal with the privacy issues or regulations that are going to happen? There are global policies that we need to adhere to as an organization, regardless of where we're coming from. And so creating that right balance is actually where most organizations are today. They've hyper decentralized as they moved to the cloud. And then they said, oh, wait a minute, we need to figure out ways that we can be much more coordinated and apply those controls and standards where we need them, but still giving that degree of freedom and meeting the speed of business as we move forward.
It's like you've been sitting on my shoulder for the last 5 years, Michelle. That's awesome. That's awesome. A few things that you said there that really stood out to me. The cloud has opened up a whole bunch of new consumption patterns, from the old analyst use case or reporting use case to machine learning and data science use cases. And those users, they need different kinds of data. Like our machine learning engineers really want the raw data because it's closest to the source. Whereas some of our teams that are closer to business decisions want that same information, but in a report. And so how do you enable users to find the right data via the right consumption pattern for their specific need at the time in a self-service, seamless experience? Like, we wrestled with that question for years internally at Capital One, and it was one of the key key challenges that we had to surmount and for us to operate the way we are now. The only way to deal with all of this data that's coming from all of these different sources and make it available to your teams is to automate as much of the governance activity as you can, because, to something you alluded to, everybody is involved in data now. Everybody is interested in data, from the teams that create it and manage it to the teams that define the policies that govern the risk of that data. And operating in the cloud requires enabling all of those different teams to work together in an integrated fashion on a central set of data products. And so, a federated model supports this expansion of data. It supports the expansion of who cares about data, and it eliminates bottlenecks while enabling people to work together.
What I love about this conversation is we took it to where I wanted to go to next, right? We spent the first part of the conversation really focusing on the change in, the data platforms and the data environment. And, common thread that both of you touched upon was really the change that happens for the users and the culture as well, right? With the shift in the tools and systems that we have, it's enabled less technical folks to be able to have access to that data. It opened up just a change in the organizations. And so, Patrick, I'd love for you to take some time to talk about what did that mean for Capital One when we moved to the federated model? What kind of a culture shift was that across the organization? And, how did the teams and users react to that?
Well, start from a place of data is now no longer just the IT team's job. Data is everybody's job. And so you as maybe a application owner or a software engineer or somebody on a team that manages a business application, in the old world, you were just responsible for sending an extract of your database to the data team on some ongoing frequency. And what they did with it from there, you didn't really care. But now, because we're federating data management responsibility, data is so important. It's now there's so much of it that you are now required to take more ownership over that thing that you produce. And so it's this additional, overhead for you. You're concerned about, in care. If you run our card applications product, getting the right product in front of the right customer at the right time. You're not concerned with making sure that the data that you send is of good quality and can be used appropriately. And so, one, getting people comfortable with the fact that you have this increased responsibility is step one. Two, making it really, really easy for teams to do their job and take on ownership over the data that they produced is incredibly important. Teams need to be able to treat their data like a product that serves customers or who are the data consumers in a company. And the teams that own the data need to treat those internal users with the same care that they would provide to external customers. And so it's things like enabling those data product owners to, through simple workflows, share their data with the right audience, protect their data with the right roles and entitlements, understand who is consuming their data and for what purpose, so that they can proactively reach out in case there are data quality issues or data publishing issues. It really requires a lot of instrumentation to help create these integrated experiences across your publishers, your consumers, your risk teams, your platform teams. And this really isn't, there's not an off-the-shelf solution that can do this. And so you have to think through how you're going to operationalize all your different teams to work together successfully.
So, Patrick, thank you for that answer. I'd like to just pull a little bit on one of the threads. You mentioned the concept around producers and consumers, and this is the first time we've mentioned that in this conversation. Could you talk just a little bit about what that means and how this model or how that federated model has helped to create that interaction and help to improve the way teams are working together?
Sure. And when we started our journey, we kind of thought about producers of data and consumers of that data as two separate groups of people. But as we progressed, as we learned more, we realized that they're actually more like modes of operating that an individual person can adopt multiple times throughout the day in the course of doing their job. And so a great example of that is a data analyst who grabs some data from a production application in the data warehouse. They create a great new insight on top of that. And now they have to, or they want to, share this insight with the rest of the company because they think it can be super valuable for other use cases. So you have this consumer who needed to find, evaluate, and use the right data, who's produced something really, really novel for their company, and now they want to share it with others. And so, that person needs different features or help at each step of that journey. And so, when we think about producers and consumers, it's more of a mode, and the way we solved their problems was trying to understand what they needed at specific times, whether that was ensuring that lineage would be tracked automatically for new data products, whether that was ensuring that the SQL code they wrote in the data warehouse could be productionized and operationalized for production purposes down the line, and providing visibility and transparency into for producers who's using your data, for consumers, what's the status of that data, and for our risk teams, is that data adhering to the company's guidelines?
Thanks, Patrick. Michelle. So Patrick talked quite a bit about our journey and how we've approached, both from a cultural standpoint, addressing the producer and consumer model as we move to this federated model. Would love to, get your insights as well on, are these similar things that you're seeing in the industry, or are there other things that you'd like to add into the conversation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, I mean, even if we go back and look at some of the responses from the survey that we did together, there's some really key themes. And as you start to move towards this federated model, as you rethink what that consumer producer or producer consumer paradigm really is, and the implications of that, it really maps well to what are the challenges that not only theoretically are going to come up, but that organizations are actually dealing with today. So when you go back and, create that cloud environment and that data and insight experience, you really need to address certain things. So for example, Patrick talked about, sort of like, how do you get the data? And difficulty integrating the data from different sources is a number one challenge. Now, certainly if you're a data engineer, you kind of know what to do. Yeah, it can be challenging at times, and you got to figure out how data fits together and schemas are reconciling and so on. But what if I'm just sitting within finance and I just want to get an insight? I just want to see a graph to see where, how I'm producing revenue. And I'm going to do this on my own in self-service. What is my mechanism to integrate data appropriately? What types of connectors do I need to make available? Do I need to create my own pipeline? Or have we already architected and engineered the environment for consumption in such a way that there's really no barrier to entry? It's ready. It's effective. But doing this in a cost-effective manner, because cloud theoretically could be less expensive, do more with less, but oftentimes there's metering costs involved in that. So designing these environments to recognize what those experiences are and understanding what is the tax to being able to federate and allow everybody to use the environment and not constraining them because your costs are constraining them. And cloud is actually providing a more effective environment and a more efficient environment if you know how to use it correctly and architect it correctly. I think the other thing is it's not just integrating the data, it's integrating the analysis, which really also comes down to, having the consistency and understanding and insights and ensuring that is going to be, effective. Especially, nobody likes going to their executives and bringing them information and having a conversation around data and they don't believe that the data is right. So that kind of ports into a lot of the challenges around what does it mean to govern data today? What does it mean to trust data today? If everybody's coming in with a different perspective, different definitions, different points of view, you really need to think about how do you ensure that you put the appropriate capabilities and features within the data environment so that it is ready to use. An example could be like a data clean room, for example. It is a, cordoned off environment where it's basically, data that's available. You can have multiple people collaborate around different types of insights, different types of machine learning, potentially, but there are embedded controls to handle security, to handle privacy, to, put the right obfuscation and access levels in on that, not just for external data breaches. And then you're also working from data that everybody is, comfortable and confident in. So if you can really address those top challenges and see them as what are the capabilities you need to design into your new cloud environments, federation is just going to be so much easier.
That's Spot on, Michelle. I liked how you highlighted a little bit of the challenges. So I have a tough question for you. It's the last question of the conversation, so we had to make it a tough one. Based on what you're seeing and hearing companies as they're weighing kind of the pros and the cons between the benefits as well as some of the challenges you highlighted, how long do you expect it will take until we see the majority of companies operating in the cloud using decentralized and federated models?
What a fun question. Okay, so you could break it apart. You can look at it through, is it happening now? And, we talked about the data in terms of federated and decentralized models, and there's still a significant portion, over 50% combined in centralized and federated. And then there's, are you doing it well? Are you effective? Are you actually getting the results and creating the experiences that you intended? So I would say we're living in a world of decentralization and federation right now, but it's a land of chaos in the majority of scenarios for most organizations. And honestly, if you're a larger enterprise and you're operating globally or you have global partnerships, of course you're operating in a decentralized or federated manner. And there's a lot of constraints as to why or why not you can bring that information together, either virtually or physically. So we're working through those things. But I think the opportunity to be competent at this is a lot closer than we think, because the technologies have actually started to mature to the point that we can do this. Everybody can do this. And so I think, if looking at, at data strategies and conversations with our Forrester clients, what it really appears to be is that we're going to launch and be competent probably within the next, no more than 2 years. But, I think the real sweet spot, because there's a lot of things to think about. This data experience thing is tough. Working out the data literacy in the organization is a challenge, and dealing with the governance features and factors are a challenge. But I think we're in this 2 to 3 year window of seeing sort of this mass competency within our environment, but probably seeing some good progress within the next 1 to 2 years.
Thanks, Michelle. And I'm not going to let you off the hot seat either, Patrick. I saw you smiling. Being in Capital One Software, I know this has given you an opportunity not just to look at Capital One, but also to have a lot of conversations out in the industry. So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and also give us your thoughts on the timeline.
I think the problem recognition is sort of reaching a critical mass. Everybody is starting to realize, hey, we have a major problem here, all at the same time. And I think it's only a matter of time until something happens to solve this data experience challenge. Anecdotally, people came up to me after Snowflake Summit and said, this data experience thing that you talked about in your breakout, we're trying to do that. What made it work for you? How were you able to accomplish this thing? And so I think in a lot of ways, the race is going to be on pretty soon. And I don't think Michelle is far off from her estimate.
Thanks, Patrick. Michelle, Patrick, thank you both for indulging me today. You've been great guests. I've learned a lot in the conversation that we had today. So thank you again for taking the time today to speak with us. And thank you all for joining and listening in today. We appreciate you as well. If you want to learn more, you can download the report we mentioned today by filling out a form on this page. There's a lot of great information about other challenges and opportunities for data management decision makers. We just couldn't fit it all in today. And if you'd like to learn more about Capital One Software, you can visit us at capitalone.com/software and follow us on Twitter at Capital One Tech.